Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Church Tech Chat. After 6 weeks, that does not get any easier to say in a hurry. So welcome. This is our week where we're thinking about this being the beginning of a journey, not the end of a journey, and thinking about how we'll take tech beyond where we are just now and use it to participate in the mission of God. I'm grateful to be able to welcome Jeremy, who's with us, and a slightly pixelated Jeremy. Tell us why that is, Jeremy.
So actually, we're visiting friends at the moment, so we're a few miles away from home, and the predictor of signal said strong 4G, and the experience is not quite that.
Well, we're glad you're here anyway. And we would play our weekly game of Where's Neil? But the answer is not in the studio right now. Neil will be with us. He is currently live streaming somewhere else and will be joining us just as soon as he is able. We'll make him feel bad when he arrives, so don't worry about that. But we are we are going to be there. And it's been a good few weeks thinking about how we are actually taking this technology thing on and where we're going. And we're aware that as we approach the end of the church session, certainly in Scotland, when the schools finish. In fact, our school bells rang in our local authority just about 2 minutes ago for the summer break. We are aware that God is going on his holidays as well, and it gives us a bit of a chance to work out where we're going in the new session. But Jeremy, we've been talking about technology now for a number of weeks and getting to think about where we are. What do you think is one of the biggest challenges facing the church about using technology in whatever we do?
So I think one of the biggest challenges is to try and find simplicity alongside sophistication, if that makes sense, because we want to be using technologies which work really well, which gives us lots of ability to use these channels that we're engaging with. But if they aren't simple enough, then we'll end up with a kind of a techno elite, and these technologies will feel scary. So I feel that there's a lot of work in progress in those areas, and wherever we can simplify, we need to. But at the moment, probably for most of us, we are stuck a little bit in that area of using technologies which feel like really sharp tools and which people are slightly scared of, and trying to find ways of simplifying. So, for example, in my context, coming up with simple kits so that we're able to do something which anybody can do using one particular camera, for example, that we can set up really simply. You press some buttons and it's done. Neil was talking about some similar things previously, and other setups that we make use of. And that just because this mustn't be something people are afraid of or think, oh, it's so scary, I can't get involved, or it's so difficult, I can't contribute and minister.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there's so much that's there. I had a family in the church building last night for a wedding rehearsal that's taking place, and he looked round and looked at the balcony and saw this bank of computer screens and cameras, and was really interested to go up, and never been in church before for a long time anyway, and he was really genuinely interested, but also genuinely terrified from all the buttons that were there. And I think that there are so many people that would like to get involved in something but just don't know where to start, and hopefully we've given some ideas over these last few weeks about where you start, and actually that the start is not about a cable. The start is about thinking about why we do this and what difference it might make to you being part of God's mission in your area. Yeah, I think the challenge of making it as simple as possible, of pushing one button and not having to remember what order the amplifier and the sound desk and everything else goes on, otherwise you'll make a big pop and blow the system. But it's difficult. I think one of the biggest challenges facing the church using technology is around the idea of how we enable people to actually take part in it, not from a knowledge perspective, but from a time perspective as well. Whether we are north or south of the border, church is changing, and our ministries are changing, and the way that we engage with church is changing. I'm minister in a charge which is a single church, and I know that's quite a privileged position to be in at the moment, and I do think that will somewhat disappear over the next few, I would say years, but I'm thinking weeks and months. Jeremy, you've got, is it 6 churches where you are at the moment?
6 churches where I am at the moment, and I'm moving, and one ordained minister, which is me, where I'm going to. There are 7 churches, but there will be 4 ordained people plus lay people in the core ministry team. So that feels like,
so in other words, that's a holiday. You're going to a holiday camp next. Absolutely.
It's a walk in the park.
But there are these challenges as to what we are willing and able to lay down in order to pick this stuff up. And I think for me, that's a big challenge as we navigate that with the leadership of our congregations, who have perhaps an expectation and understanding of what ministry is and how we get involved in this, and not really understanding the time it takes to do these things and the effort it takes. I mean, I had school assemblies this morning, I was telling you just before we started, and normally I'd go up to a school and have 400 children in front of me, and we'd have a great old time. We'd have fishy music songs and everyone would be bouncing. And we ended up having 3, which turned into 4 remote online assemblies with different classes, with technology that didn't work, with some classes with a microphone, some without a microphone, tried to be interactive without a microphone, using sign language is quite something. But the challenge, the time it takes, all these different things, and just navigating what you can and can't do is, I think, really going to be a challenge for the church going forward. And I think one of the challenges that we've heard time and time again, and we're going to try and address this. We've got 2 guests with us today. We have got, and I'm just going to introduce them just now, so I'm just giving them fair warning to comb their hair, straighten their glasses, and I'll not tell you finish your sandwich. But we've got Martin Fair with us, who was just eating his sandwich. And what was on the sandwich today, Martin?
Cheese as always, Brian.
Cheese.
Never anything less, never anything more. Cheese sandwich.
You know, and what sort of bread?
Oh, mother's bread.
See, there you are.
Can take the boy out of Glasgow, but
and Martin's here, and also we're grateful that Ian McClarty is with us as well. Have you had your lunch yet, Ian, or are you saving yourself for after?
I have, yes. Also cheese, but on oat cakes instead.
See that's just the difference there. And you're in the West End of Glasgow, yeah?
East End, actually.
Oh, the East End. Okay.
Sorry, what?
East End oat cakes. Fantastic.
Not sure what you were insinuating there, Brian.
Nothing at all. Nothing. Just the oat cakes and cheese. Absolutely taking it out there, just like Martin taking plain bread to the streets of Arbroath, one slice at a time, changing the world. We're going to come back to Martin in a little bit, but we're going to ask Ian to lead us through one of the most challenging things that we've all found over the last kind of 15 months, and that is what we can and what we can't do in terms of music and copyright and permissions and all those things. And I'm expecting Ian to say at some point, nothing's free in this world. And that's quite right. But hopefully Ian will be able to help us navigate some of these complexities. So Ian, we're going to hand over to you for the next wee while so you can share with us some of what we hope helps us out with these challenges.
Great, thanks very much. Lovely to be with you today. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of using music in online services, but mainly the copyright and licensing issues. And right at the beginning, I think it's important to add 2 fairly major caveats. Firstly, every situation is unique. So I'll give a general overview, but if you're in any doubt, I'd always recommend speaking to an expert about your exact circumstances. And secondly, this is based on my personal knowledge of where things are right now. Over the last year, we've seen a lot changing, new licenses coming in, etc. So you need to keep up to date with it. And also, this is not legal advice, so some guidance, but it's your responsibility to make sure you have the appropriate permissions and licenses to cover you. So to start off, I think one thing that's important to say is that when you use music in online worship, we're not just talking about one set of rights owned by one person or company. You have a whole layer of different rights that you have to think about. So, for example, you have different ones covering displaying lyrics, synchronizing music with visual media, performing music, or playing a pre-existing recording. And you need different licenses and agreements to cover each of these. So there's kind of two main things to think about. One is the copyright of the song itself, so the music, the lyrics, the arrangement, and the other is the rights for the performance, so the recording or the video, who's made it, who's performed it. So if we deal with the first one of those first, the rule of thumb is basically that a song is in copyright in the UK if the composer, lyricist, or arranger are still alive or they died within the last 70 years. So there's a few exceptions. For example, if it wasn't published till after the writer's death, but 70 years is the general rule. So currently that means if they died in 1950 or earlier, then the work's in the public domain. So when Brian was saying nothing is free, actually, if a song was entirely written 1950 or earlier, you can do whatever you want with it for free. That's fine. Where we need to worry is if it was written, any part of it was written in 1951 or later. And that's when you then need an agreement with the copyright holder to use it in any way. And you'll generally do that through a licensing agency. So most people have heard of Christian Copyright Licensing International, or CCLI for short. And they're simply a company who act as a kind of intermediary between the person who wants to use the song, church congregation, and the copyright holder. And that makes the whole process simpler, rather than having to have a separate agreement with the writer of every single song from every single separate church who want to use it. But one of the reasons that this is important is because CCLI are not the only company who do this. One License would be the other major company. And also you do get some songs which aren't registered with any. Not so many, most nowadays would be, but there are some. So if you've established you're wanting to use a song, it's in copyright rights written in 1951 or later, you want to use it in an online service, your first step is to work out who licenses it. And broadly speaking, you're going to be using CCLI or One License. They cover there's a lot of overlap between what they cover. So they both cover what I might call, say, mainstream hymnody. So thinking with contemporary hymns, that's John Bell, Shirley Ann Murray, Keith Getty, Stuart Townend. Both of them will cover most of that. CCLI will then tend to also cover more of what you might call the CCM style, kind of worship songs. So Hillsong, Matt Redman, Worship Central. Whereas One License will tend to cover what's sometimes, and I don't really like the term being used this way, kind of more liturgical style music. So maybe stuff more from a Roman Catholic or Lutheran context. So Marty Hogan, Bernadette Farrell, Tezzy. So each of them cover those separate areas. So it matters what you sing. And I just realized I can't seem to post in the chat, but we'll post some links for, I'll post them in the private chat, and then hopefully Brian or someone else can share them. So some links there to CCLI and One License. Just an example, if you were to sing everything in CH4, you would actually need licenses from both CCLI and One License, plus there are some songs which actually aren't registered with either. A very small number, you don't tend to have to worry about them. But that gives you an example that you do have to look at not just one company. Once you've established the company which will cover the copyright, and both of them you can search their website and they'll tell you what's in their catalogue, then you need to choose which licenses you need. And that's basically based on how you're going to use them. So for online worship, you'll always need a streaming license. One License have this as a standalone product. CCLI is an add-on to their church copyright license, or CCL, which is probably what a lot of churches already had, because that also covers you for using lyrics in your service, whether online or offline. So that's slides, subtitles, a downloadable order of service. In person, it's if you're printing, so that's covered by the church copyright license for CCLI, and for One License, that's what's covered by their annual license. So that's two licenses you're probably going to need already. Then if you are streaming via YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, you're probably covered at this stage for the copyright of the song at least. But if you're hosting on your own website, or if you're using another platform, for example, if you're using video conferencing, then you will need to have what's called a limited online music license, which covers the performance rights, and you get that from PRS for Music, who are a secular licensing agency. They deal with a lot of stuff, but specifically for churches, this would be the main thing you have to worry about. Maybe if you've had concerts in your church, you would have had to deal with them as well before. So that's all the things you have to really think about with the copyright, or the main things you have to think about for the copyright of the song. The separate set of rights is for the performers of the song. So if all your music's being performed and recorded by local musicians, specifically for your services, then you're sorted. You don't need to worry about this. What you do need to think about is if you're looking to use a pre-existing recording. So if that's a CD, an MP3, a video you find online, you'll need to have permission from the copyright holder before you can use it. And it is really tempting to think that just because you have it for free online, something you can find on YouTube, that you can use it. Or if you own it already, like a CD, that you can use it for free. But unfortunately, that's not the case. You do need permission before you can do that. Until recently, it was very difficult because there was no license available. And luckily, CCLI have now provided a Streaming Plus license, which helps with some of this. It lets you play some recordings, so you need to double check that they're covered, but that is one route to getting around that. The second thing is that a lot of people have provided stuff for free online. They've said, I will let you use my stuff while online worship is happening because of the pandemic. And they can post quite a big list of those. But there's some songs available to download from the Church of Scotland CH4 website. There's things like hymnary.org, I Sing Worship, and then also particular songwriters like Getty Music, New Scottish Hymns, and Resound Worship. So that's the second thing. The third thing is you just have to get permission from the owners of the recordings directly. If it's, say, YouTube, you can just comment or send them, put a post under the video and say, can I use this or something? But you do need to get that permission. And the final thing to emphasize on that is that that's just for the copyright for the performance. So unless they're also the songwriters, you still need the licenses from CCLI and one license. If anyone knows of any other places, as I say, I'll post a link, a list, but if anyone knows of any others, that's a great thing to share. I know that's kind of gold dust for churches at the moment, is where can you get stuff that's legal to use. So do share that with each other. So that gives you a general overview. Happy to answer any questions, but as I said at the beginning, talking to an expert about your particular circumstances is always highly recommended. I've always found CCLI One License and PRS to be very helpful. If you go to them with a direct question, they will help you with it. I'll also post links to 2 guides. So there's one which I created last summer for the Church of Scotland. It's slightly out of date now, so it doesn't have the Streaming Plus license on it, but the general principles of it still apply. And there's also a blog from the agency manager of Jubilate Hymns, which explains a lot of this in some detail. So there you go. I don't know how I did with time, but that gives you a general overview of copyright and licensing.
Absolutely perfect on time. I mean, it was a whistle-stop tour, which is really, really good. I think the Streaming Plus license has allowed a bit more flexibility in what CCL, and it would be fair to say that CCLI, a bit like the rest of us, were caught out with a pandemic and weren't really thinking about how they could roll out a much bigger copyright program for streaming. And I found CCLI very helpful when we were curating the moderators worship in the kind of first half of this year. CCLI were really helpful in terms of what could and couldn't be done by congregations who held licenses. And I think the thing that they told me, and again, depends who you speak to, but the use of what they call master recordings with that Streaming Plus license, effectively they said, if the song appears in our catalogue, then you're able to kind of use it if you have a legal audio recording, not video, but audio recording, and put words over it. And unfortunately, it's profoundly difficult, isn't it, to get straight permission to use a video unless it's been given for free use that some have, and people
Videos
like
are definitely the most complicated.
Absolutely, but people like the Gettys have given some. Even Graham Kendrick has given some, and New Scottish, as you say, and I think those have been bread and butter for lots of churches over the last few years. But one of the interesting things that's open to anyone, certainly within the Church of Scotland, to join on Microsoft Teams is there's a team called Video Worship Resources that we created, and that allows churches to go on and maybe say, does anyone have a recording of this that we could use, and put it up. And it's been really helpful. The good people up north as well have been giving us lots of videos. I'm just desperately trying to remember where it was. Was it Bucky? Bucky, I think. I can't remember where it was now. But they have done a huge. Ellen, sorry, it was Ellen had done a lot and had worked with us on the moderators team for even creating things in a hurry for us. And perhaps, Ian, one of the challenges that we need to throw out there to people is once we are back in church and once we are ready to worship again, once we're able to sing again, make sure you record some songs. Make sure you do it so that you've got a bank of them, because we never know when this could happen again. We never know when we might be in a situation we need to use it. But equally, there's been a lot of, as we've been talking about, a lot of people who now want to go online for worship, and it would give a bank of resources that a congregation have sung, so therefore the performance isn't an issue. It's about then having the other CCL licenses.
I think there's different videos or different styles of recording make people feel like they're worshipping in different ways. So, like you're saying, a congregational one can be really important for making people feel like that, because it is really good to use ones that are the kind of performers that, they've produced it as a nice polished performance video, a bit like something that's in the charts. They can be great, but if every single one of your videos is like that you use in online worship, it creates a certain dynamic and a certain feel, and probably makes people feel a little bit like they can't join in as much. So I think getting a mix is really important. And the opportunity with some of it is looking at things like Resound Worship, New Scottish, Getty, Townsend stuff, where they're providing it for free. Maybe your congregation don't know them already, but you can introduce some new songs. And as long as it's one or two that you're introducing at a time, then it's a great opportunity. But yeah, certainly with the CH4 downloads, basically that was what do we have available already, and a big chunk of that could have been, say, General Assembly stuff, or things that were made when CH4 was launched specifically for that purpose. So yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, our folks have responded really well to a mix, and we're fortunate. We've been streaming for 10 years or recording for 10 years, so we've got quite a bank of hymns that we can go back to. Some greater than others, I would say, and some that we've said, right, we're not going to use the video for that one. It's a bit choppy, but we've got the audio and we can put something over it. And I think there's a whole host of things. I'm going to bring a question in now. Neil has asked a question here about, do you need to notify YouTube in advance of licenses? I've heard of stories of live streams being taken down. It's interesting. We live stream using YouTube, but our recorded watch again is on Vimeo, because they have a different way of coping with that because they don't have the license. But what's your kind of advice on that, Ian?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any way of notifying them in advance. The problem essentially is YouTube have a kind of automated system, and Facebook have it as well, I think, where if they think that what you're doing is a recording from a big company, so if they think you're using a song that has been recorded by someone that owns the rights to it, they automatically take it down, and you have to challenge it and say, no, I do have the rights. But there doesn't appear to be any way to do that in advance. And, it works outside a church setting as well. I did a charity fundraiser for a performance of Ode to Joy, the last movement of Beethoven 9, put it up, and it gets taken down because they're saying, it's the Berlin Phil or something. It's like, that's very complimentary that you think it's that good. But it's not we own the rights to it. It's a new recording. So sadly, I'm not aware of how you can notify them in advance. If anyone does have any tips on that, certainly uploading it is when it happens. So if you upload in advance and then don't post the link till later, that's probably the only way around it. If you're doing it live, I don't think there is a way around it, unfortunately.
The good thing is that YouTube and Facebook work in different ways with live streams. Facebook will mute the clip and mute the stream if they find something. YouTube won't do that live. So it allows it to play out live, but in the recording, it will do that. And that's certainly why we moved over to YouTube for our live host. So if you're doing it live, YouTube is a bit more secure for those things. I don't think there's a church in the country, perhaps even in the world, that's live streamed that hasn't had a strike where apparently Universal Music Group own the rights to something, or at least try to own the rights to something that your congregation have recorded, or you've got the rights for. So thanks very much, Neil, for that question. I'm going to bring in Jeremy and Neil just now. In terms of your worship over the last kind of year, Jeremy, have you encountered any issues with kind of music, or what have been some of the challenges around that?
So I would say, from a Church of England perspective, the Church of England, in partnership with St Martin in the Fields in Cambridge, produced its own recordings that we were free to use, and that's been a great resource. It doesn't actually completely remove those copyright claim issues, but it's reduced them a great deal. I do have one recommendation. So for turning audio, sometimes audio extracted from videos that you maybe did a while back and they don't quite work now. There's a tool called Kapwing, spelled KAPWING.com, that I hugely recommend if people want to produce lyric videos in a hurry, in a matter of minutes, as opposed to a mammoth and technology-driven editing session. I found that incredibly useful. And we've built up a bank of a couple of hundred songs that we've made lyric videos, and then about as many again that we have the audio for. And simply knowing that that's increasing over time has been incredibly helpful, because people are very attached to particular hymns and songs and can be very frustrated when they say, yeah, that's there on YouTube and I could just have it.
That's really, really helpful. And also it'll be helpful when you share the couple of hundred lyric videos with us as well, so that we can all share in your wonder and get the permission to use the performance. What about you, Neil? What have you guys kind of done in terms of music and different things like that? Oh, Neil is muted. There you go.
Sorry.
He's in his car and he's muted.
Strike one. As in Andrews, we do one of two things. One, I either buy or search hard for licensed music that I can use. Actually, I'll say three things. On very rare occasions, I've sung it myself. So I've maybe taken an organ backing track, which are more readily available, and then layered on 2 or 3 voices which are all me effectively. To produce something that we need in a hurry but we can't find elsewhere. And more latterly, our praise band has been pre-recording stuff using a cappella, where you kind of send around the music file to different musicians and they all put their layer on top, and that comes back and we put that out. Because we stream to a custom streaming service, not Facebook or YouTube in the first instance, then the version of our stream on our church website is copyright free effectively in terms of strikes and takedowns and so on. So we always have a guarantee that our service will go out on our church website. We then restream it to Facebook, and there has been the odd occasion, typically in a meditation or something, where there's 10 seconds worth of something that somebody's complaining about, and Brian's outlined the usual culprits. So we tend not to find it with worship songs because we're largely rolling our own, or we're buying licensed stuff. And actually, it's not expensive. So maybe $1.50, $2 for a song. And like most churches, we sing the same songs every 3 weeks anyway. So it's only after 15 quid, you've got your repertoire all sorted out.
Don't say that to Ian McClarty. He's trying to do a supplement to sell us next. I mean, that's it in the Church of Scotland. But I think it's true.
Sorry, Brian. I have heard people have limited success about putting their CCLI numbers at the beginning of their live stream. That's only apocryphal. I've no idea if that works, but some people seem to think it works.
Yeah, and I've even started trying to put it in the description of the video as well in the hope that it might pick it up, but I don't think anything like that picks it up at all. Sorry, Ian, you were going to say something there.
I was just going to say maybe we can add one more song to Neil's Church's repertoire with the supplement, but...
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Since you've mentioned it, can I do a wee cheeky plug that we are looking for? We're doing a survey at the moment to try and get churches to give us ideas for what should go in the supplement. So can maybe get a link to that in the comments as well. As a supplement, so we're looking for stuff written after CH4 was published. But it's all the details are there. I'll put the link in our chat.
So no Baroque music in the new supplement then, Ian?
No, it could be contemporary Baroque. So if someone has written Baroque music since 2003, any style of music is absolutely fine as long as it was written since then.
Excellent, good, excellent, thank you. Donald McCorkindale, one of our regular friends, has put up on his website, itsforministry.org/music-videos, a link to that Microsoft Teams group that I was talking about, which gives links to resources that churches have created, and also a further list of links that will be helpful, like Emu Music in Australia have done a lot of stuff as well, and different things that we've all seen and all used. So listen, thank you very much for that. Ian, we're going to let you go back into the waiting room. We'll see you at the end. But thank you very much for sharing that. And I don't think anyone's confused. I think it was a very helpful session of what you can and can't do, and we're grateful for you walking us through that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much.
So Neil, where is Neil?
Well, sadly, client confidentiality forbids me from saying where I've been, but I will share you the view from where I've been today. So let me just share my window here. So this is the view, if you're seeing that there. There's a rather iconic building in the background. So that's where I've been today. Live streaming until it ran over, of course, like most of these things do. It went till about 1:45, and then I was able to pack up and get parked. So if any of you think you know where that is, then that's where I've been. I'm sure you can guess the city of where it is.
Yes. We've spent many an afternoon traipsing around that very place with you, Neil. Those of us who have known you a long time. But that's great. I mean, it's good that you finished off this season's series with an iconic building of where you are, rather than sheep shearing.
Sadly, I was only looking at it, not streaming from it. But at the very least, it was outdoors and it was good.
To be fair though, we have streamed from that building before, Neil. We have had a lone piper on the wall. Yeah. So
for sure. I also just something that flabbergasted me actually just 10 minutes ago. On my way to my car parking spot just here, I popped in to do a recce for the funeral service I'll be live streaming tomorrow, and maybe actually I might say a word or two about funeral services later on. And I did a coverage check for 4G, and my jaw almost hit the floor as I got 280 megabytes per second down and 65 megabits per second up, and that's on 4G. I mean,
you're making poor Jeremy very, very upset right now. Very upset.
Rage.
But it actually it goes to show. I mean, that sanctuaries that think I don't have any internet, we don't have the internet, we can't stream. Actually, in the ether round about you, you probably find you have more than enough to do what you need to do, and actually all you need is a bit of wherewithal and deciding to do it. I showed you in a previous episode the 4G routers that you can get, and of course with 5G coming along, that's only going to improve. Apart from the nanoparticles, of course, that fly around your body, but we'll not talk about that here.
Yeah.
But internet is more accessible than it's ever been, And even in rural areas, I live streamed a funeral for a farmer in the middle of West Lothian in the hills. And there's 4G there, and it was just fine. So the internet is no longer a reason for not being able to live stream. It really is improving, despite Jeremy's experience, perhaps.
No.
It really is improving, and it's not that expensive. A 20 gig SIM card might only cost you £10 or £15 a month.
Well, there's Mike Goss is saying that he doesn't get 4G in one of his churches, but he has done it in live stream without too much lag, and I'm sure the reduction in lag was only highlighted by Mike's increase in stress at that point, wondering if it was going to work. I did hear of a company in Glasgow yesterday that's been out to look at churches in our area and or speaking to some of the ministers, which provides a small kind of A5 size unit that you can put on the outside of your building, and they cable it into the building so that you can get internet within it. And there's actually a government scheme that if Superfast isn't going to be rolled out, if there are no plans in your area, then the installation of that may be free using a government voucher. And if you're not getting Superfast by the end of 2021, you can get a reduced installation fee. And it's a company called Flexify.co.uk based in Glasgow, and it may well be worth just a little conversation if internet is an issue in some churches.
And which government was that?
I'm not sure actually
Right.
whether it's UK. I think it's probably UK government in terms of infrastructure about that, but it was or it's the 4G Scottish Broadband Voucher Scheme. So I'm not sure where it's from, but it's certainly something to do with that contract and where they go. So it's maybe worth a little look. So we're going to bring in Martin, but very, very briefly, Jeremy, Neil, what do you think is the biggest opportunity facing the church with the use of technology? Just very briefly, Jeremy.
So, yeah, for me, something I've touched on before, which is we have this history where we've been very Sunday focused, and we've tried to compress a great deal, and now we can spread that in all sorts of ways. So we're both empowering people to, if you like, take church and their community with them, but also we're able to use these same tools to interact with one another through the week. So that's an opportunity. It has some costs associated with it in terms of time and everything else, but I think it's an amazing opportunity.
Neil?
For me, I think the opportunity is missional. We've spent a lot of time and energy over the last 15 months during lockdown getting those who already come to church online and carrying on essentially what we've had before. Now what we have is an opportunity with the technology already in place now to reach a whole new group of folks who have yet to, quote unquote, darken the door, or at least come across the threshold of church. And so the opportunity is now ripe for digital mission, reaching out into new demographics, into new areas. The parish boundaries, such as they ever were, are no longer your obstacle, if indeed they were. And I think that is the opportunity. Now that we have this technology, how do we do effective mission with it and bring people to our church, and more importantly, to know our Lord Jesus?
That sounds like a good point to bring in Martin, who's going to... Martin, you were or are the immediate past moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. You've just been released back into the community and beginning to work through these things. And you've had a lot of thoughts about where the church is going in missionally using technology. And we're very grateful that you've had an overview over this last year and are going to maybe share with us some of your thoughts today. So if we can just give you the floor, and you can share with us where you feel we're going and where the opportunities for the church might be.
Okay, thanks, Brian. And Neil just queued me up perfectly with what he said a couple of minutes ago. But I want to go, before saying what I prepared to go right back to what Jeremy said at the beginning. He talked about simplicity. And I think that's well worth emphasizing. I am very much now involved in what we might call digital ministry, but I'm not an expert by any means, so I need it to come to me in ways that I can handle. To illustrate that, when I was doing my first degree, which was in politics, we came near the end of it, and we were told that one of the exams we were going to be doing was on a computer. Now, I'd never seen a computer. I'd never touched a computer. I really didn't know what they were, but I thought, well, how difficult could it be? And these computers were in rooms, and we each had an hour to go into the room and thereafter to do this exam that was on the computer. Well, I spent the whole hour not being able to switch it on or do anything that might make doing the exam itself possible. So I come at tech, as an absolute Luddite with no background, no learning whatsoever, and yet here I am now. I can make films for worship. I can fly a drone, for goodness sake, and it's that learning curve that's been so exciting. And I'm trying to say that to maybe encourage folks who sometimes listen to others and think, oh, this is beyond me. It needn't be. And, the learning curve is great fun as we go there. But let me get back to what I prepared. And I want to say this, and I hope you're going to enjoy this little poem. I'm not interested in how awesome your apps are, how big your bytes are, how cracking your cameras are, how dynamic your dongles are, how epic your ephemeral content is, how fancy your Facebook is. I'm not interested in how great your GarageBand is, how handy your hashtags are, how integrated your Intel is, how joyous your JPEGs are, how killer your kit is. I'm not interested how luminous your LED lights are, how magic your MacBook is, how neat your nanos are, how opulent your optics are, how pretty your pictures are. I'm not interested how quick you are to get on Quora, how radical your RAM is, how sound your Sennheisers are, how tall your tripods are, how uber your UV is, how vroom your videos are. I'm not interested how wide your wide angles are, how excellent your x86 processor socket is, how youthful your YouTube is, how zany your ZX Spectrum is. I'm not interested in any of that unless it's there to further the cause of Christ. And that, for me, has to be bottom line in all of this. The good news is the tech, the digital opportunities can be lending themselves towards the cause of Christ, can be tools in the hand of those of us who want to be missional, who want to take the good news of Jesus Christ and publish it abroad. So it has to be to that end, and the good news is that it can be. Brian's mentioned that during the year just past, of course, that I served as moderator. Well, there was no other way. In the whole course of the year, I was in 6 churches in person, and the rest of the time it was all online. But how gratifying it was to pick up responses from all airts and parts of Scotland and around the world, people who had connected. As Neil said, much of what we have done hitherto has been about connecting or making worship and other activities of the church possible for those who are already in. But I want to pick up his theme when he said, we got to get hold of the missional possibilities and start to see that this can get us beyond the door of the church, beyond the threshold. And I want to illustrate that with just one story. Right at the beginning, Brian mentioned that the bell of the local school where he is in Lanark had just gone. Well, 11 years ago, on this day, in other words, the last day of school in my town, there was a real tragedy, one of the great tragedies of my near 30 years in ministry. This young lad had come out of Arbroath Academy where I'm chaplain. Yes, it was the last day. School had finished at lunchtime. He leapt on his bike and he bombed down the streets and was heading into the high street, down into the centre of the town here in Arbroath. And being a daft laddie as he was, he came down a one-way street and from there onto the high street. And because he came that way, he was unseen by traffic on the main road. And absolutely tragically, as he emerged at the bottom of this little one-way street, a double-decker bus was coming and met him right on the junction. And this young lad, his name was Jamie, was crushed under this bus by the impact of the collision, and he was killed outright. It was the last day of school term, and that's why it's very much in my mind, because today is the same here in our town, maybe in yours as well. But you know, that situation would be tragic enough just in itself, but it's the next part of it which doubles the agony. There was a guy about 100 yards up the road from this, and when he saw it happening, he did what I guess most people would do, and he started running towards the incident to see if there was anything he could do to help. And of course, there was the young lad, really crushed and killed. The man who ran to see if he could help was the young lad's dad. Now, how could you ever foresee that that would be the circumstance? I mean, what are the chances that it would be his dad would be coming down the street, would be the first person in the scene, who would run down to the bus, who would see the young lad and then be struck with a hammer blow and more to see that it was his own son? Well, as the chaplain at the academy in Arbroath and the family lived within my parish, I was then asked to do the funeral, which I did, and gosh, that was a tough one, I'll tell you that much. And I kept up with the dad for some considerable time since after that. He really struggled, wouldn't you all? And he said many times to me, you know, Martin, I've got to find something. I've got to find some light in the midst of the darkness that I'm walking in right now. I've got to find some hope, got to find some way forward for my life. And he would say to me, I'm going to come to church. I'm going to come to church. I need to find something. And anyway, the guy, and I still see him today, he tried to come many, many times. He got himself up and going on the Sunday, and he walked down to our church, and he got to the door, or at least the pavement that would have led him to the door, and he just couldn't make himself come in. I don't know why. I mean, I guess he'd never been in a church before, so that was a big leap to begin with. He didn't know the people that he was going to meet within. And for these and maybe 101 other reasons, maybe he just guessed it was going to be really emotional for him. He couldn't come in. And so time after time, he came to church, stopped at the gates and walked on. And he would tell me afterwards, I couldn't come in, I'm really sorry. And then, well, a good number of years ago, we started live streaming. We started producing digital content. And that dad found his way in. Now, right there, if that was the only story I had to share, and let me promise you there's a heck of a lot more, but if that was the one, then it would be enough. and it would be justification for me for what we have been about, maximising the digital opportunities. Yes, pastorally, for those of our folks, but missionally, for those who were not and perhaps could not bring themselves into the physicality of church. So, friends, let's absolutely understand, maximise and take hold of the missional possibilities that are ours in this digital world. If we don't, well, it would have been going back, how many? 550, 600 years and saying to Mr. Gutenberg, nah, sorry, we've no need for your printing press, not interested, nothing to do with us. Well, that's where we would be at. So let's grab it and let's go for it. Brian, I'll pause there and let you come back on board.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Such powerful stuff. Not only your poem, but particularly that story. And I think to know that people have found their way into the church through the stuff that you do is a real impetus as to why we do this, why we begin to grapple with this technology. Just incredible. And I think Neil shared a story a few weeks ago about someone from down south who was part of their church online and found his way into the building to talk with the people who were there. And just incredible to know that people's lives are touched, and what we do in the kingdom is what we do online as well. So a huge thank you to you for those comments. Neil, Jeremy, have you anything that you want to kind of say to Martin or ask Martin at this stage about what his experiences are? Some of us have been working with him over this last year as well.
Maybe a question, Martin. One of the words which I despise, and people who've been watching these will know, is the word virtual. How have you felt the reality of relationships at a distance?
I think they are very real. That's the bottom line. And they become that if we make them that. And let me try to illustrate what I mean with a kind of different example. If we understand that messy church is church and not just a kind of excuse to try to get to folks to come to real church, then we can really develop and maximize brilliant relationships through messy church. But if we only ever think of it as a short window to real church, then it'll always be somewhat shallow. And in the same way, if we understand that people we're going to connect with online, that's real and not just, well, maybe they'll meet us there and then they'll come to church, as in Sunday morning, 11 o'clock, then we're never going to get to know them properly. So let's understand that it is absolutely as real as any other kind of relationship. Listen, I can't wait to hug people again. I can't wait to do all manner of stuff like that. But I'm not going to lose sight as we go forward that I'm going to have real relationships online.
And I think that's the challenge, isn't it? How do we blend those two things together? The expectations of perhaps a congregation that, I mean, if I counted, I would lose count very quickly of the number of congregations that have told me they are looking forward to getting back to normal, not realizing that normal has changed. I mean, one of our elders says that he's a counsellor, and he said it takes 6 weeks to make or break a habit. 6 weeks. How long have we been away from traditional church or normal church or singing in a church building? You know, these are important, but they aren't all that we are. They shouldn't be the only thing that defines us as a church. We've talked about buildings for years, that a building shouldn't just be something that you use for an hour on a Sunday. And actually worship needs to be seen in that same way now as well, that it's a huge opportunity for us. Jeremy, I
if I
thought you were
can
looking
cheat
to come in.
starting from what you just sorry. So starting from what you just said there, Brian, Martin, could I ask you two things? So if you could snap your fingers and help every church to find one thing to do differently and one different thing to do, what would be those two things? The thing to be done differently and a different thing to do to help us realize those missional possibilities you've pointed to.
Do you know, Jeremy, I'm really not sure I'm going to answer your question straight off. It's a great question, and if I was in a General Assembly right now, I might have said, I could have done with some notice of the question, Commissioner, because I think it's deeper than I think right now, if I was to answer it, I would be, I don't know, I'd just be clutching at something, quite random, just for the sake of answering your question. I think it's more to it, and I know that this is the end of a season of seminars and so on like this, but let's not make that the end of it, because the question you've asked as we go forward, questions like that are absolutely critical. Yes, there are different things, there are a whole range of different things to be done, but I'm going to not answer your question for fear of just throwing something silly into the mix.
However, that does suggest that you're coming back as a guest on our next season, so it's fine. Good. Martin, I'm aware of your time as well, because I know you've got another meeting you need to dash off with. But what we wondered, there are people who watch this live and people who watch it recorded, and sometimes it can feel a little bit that those of us involved in online worship are a bit on the fringe of things, and it can feel quite difficult. Neil has often spoken about the need to remember those who are involved in the tech at the start of worship when we gather. The same would be true, and we're just going to bring Ian back in as well. The same would be true for our musicians. That we are all part of leading worship, whether it's online or in person or however that may be. And I wondered, Martin, if you would be willing to lead us in a prayer or some sort of commissioning, just to help us on our way as we navigate this in this new season of church.
Yeah, I'm pleased to do so, Brian. For a good number of years, we commissioned teams of young people at our church who went for short-term mission opportunities in Malawi, and it was in the building, and we were sending them out, and in a very clear and obvious way, they were going overseas. But let's understand that mission is, you don't have to go anywhere. It's right here, or it starts on your doorstep and on the street where you live and in and around about your town. That's one thing. But the second thing is this: we are sending out now, digitally speaking. And that's the calling and that's the commissioning that we've been talking about. So I think really it is in the whole tradition of Abraham, going right back to Abraham, who was called to leave what was known and dear, and to take something of a step into the unknown, only knowing that God had called him to that and that there were promises attached to it. So with these things in mind, sure, let's bow our heads. Let's pray. Almighty God, you have always been in the business of calling people. And we are thankful that through every age and generation, there have been those who have heard your call and who have been obedient to it. Often, like Abram, leaving what was familiar and going into that new territory. We find ourselves in similar places now. And so we ask a blessing upon all those who are engaging with the tech, those who are experimenting, those who are stepping out digitally, perhaps for the first time, or honing their skills. Lord, we pray for the gifting of your Spirit in all of that. That yes, we would be sensitive to this new land, to the needs of the folk that inhabit it, and that in all things, whatever buttons we press, levers we pull, switches we switch, that making known the name of Jesus and looking for the coming of his kingdom is the reason behind it all. So let us go in the strength of the Lord, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Martin, for being with us. We really appreciate your time, and we all want a copy of that poem that you read out at the start, so you can get that to us. I think it was fabulous that you even brought in the ZX Spectrum, which is really good, which does show your age somewhat, but we'll give you that. We'll give you that. At least it wasn't the ZX81 with the printer that all you could do was repeat your name on a till roll and be excited and wowed by it. So yeah. But Martin, we're aware of your time. Thank you. We'll let you go, and hopefully we'll see you in our next season of Church Tech Chats. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
We four of us are left as we go, and I just want to ask, as we finish this type of session today, what's the thing that maybe excites you most about the possibility of the church moving into this live streaming or online presence? And I'm going to go to Ian first from a musical perspective, because I'm interested in that. So I think we've discovered Jeremy is now on the flight path of either Heathrow or Gatwick. So this is now a where's Jeremy. We'll be able to put a pin in it somewhere. But Ian, what's the thing that excites you most about the possibilities?
The thing that springs to my mind first is actually not a musical answer, I have to say. The thing which excites me is seeing more people getting involved in planning and leading worship. So I think, having seen there's perhaps more willingness for someone to go, yeah, I'll do the reading for this, or I'll do the prayer. And I really hope, whether it's online church, kind of in-person church, or hybrid church going forward, that we take that forward. I think related to that, people have also been willing maybe a bit more to kind of, there's not one perfect thing that is how we expect things to be done, which means that there's not quite the same thing if something minuscule thing goes wrong, that's the end of the world. So just, people having a bit more patience with each other, and all right, something's gone wrong. I'm still muted and I'm speaking. I need to unmute. I can have a wee laugh about that. If people take that attitude into being able to plan and lead worship together, and it involves the whole people of God, the priesthood of all believers, I think there's big opportunities there which are really, really exciting. And maybe the exciting side of some of the less exciting things that we would have been talking about at the General Assembly around ministry numbers, there's some real positives there. Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you. Jeremy, assuming the plane has now departed for its holidays somewhere, obviously only a green list country, what excites you most about this?
So actually mine was very similar, that there are so many ways in which everyone within the church family can contribute in a meaningful way to the mission of God. And for instance, if we think about, well, how many things can the church do? We so often think, well, here's a core team and here are people who are volunteering, so here are 20 things we want to do, and then we divide and divide and divide. In this digital arena, everybody is able to play a part, and there's too much for us to try and take on in a kind of centralized way. But all the different channels that people communicate, all the places that people have discovered and found ways of being themselves online and so on, everyone, regardless of age and stage in the church, can get involved in that and can be on the front line of that mission. I think that's just amazing. Again, those sort of things we've talked about for so long, and now we have the tools to do them.
Excellent. Yeah. Neil?
I'm excited about the idea that this is then just becomes normal. And I was reviewing yesterday a hybrid church charter which Premier are putting out. I don't know if it's shareable yet, so I'll not say anything more about it. But I was having a look at it, and it was about how do we make commitments into keeping digital at the forefront as we transition out of lockdown, God willing, into the next phase. And as I went through it, I thought the more and more I thought we need hybrid is only a transitional phase, and it's the next transition from becoming online, and it's the transitional phase to just being church, and that church in however long it is, that what we are calling online church and hybrid church and on-site church and in-person church, in 5, 10, 20 years, they will just call it church because it's the way it's always been. And so I'm just looking forward to tech not being an exception, not being something that is a new budget line, not being something that we don't know anything about. It's just going to be the normal because this is how we do church, and it's just church. That's what I'm looking forward to.
I think that's really exciting because, I was reading something during the week that spoke about the first church in, I think it was Glasgow. Ian, you might be able to correct me, to get a pipe organ installed, and let's just say it did not go down well as to how that went, and there were rather a few tense discussions, whole-scale hod the jackets moments at that point. And now, of course, it's become such an accepted part of worship, trying to remove one out of a church, and you get the same. The same is true of pews. There was a time when people brought their stool to church. Pews were put in so that we could fit the most amount of bums and the most amount of floor space at any one time. Now, to remove them, you suddenly think that you've opened a portal to the dark place in many places. And I think, for me, technology is a bit like that in church, that we've had a lot of the arguments about why we need a camera up there where people can see it, or can we not hide the screen a little bit more because it looks a bit like a screen rather than, I don't know, like a flower vase where 60 inches of glorious LED suddenly project from. And now we need to get beyond that into these things being part of who we are, part of our DNA, part of our mission, part of our community, part of our witness, part of our outreach, part of our love of sharing the gospel message. And I think it's going to be an interesting, exciting, incredibly bumpy few years until we come through that. But come through it, I'm sure we will, as it becomes much more acceptable to people. I want to finish my wee bit with one story of a person in our congregation who had an accident and went into a large hospital in Glasgow, and he lived on his own, no real family, and each Sunday the staff would wheel in one of the big computer monitors or big TVs, hook up the iPad so that the person could join in with the service. And I went in to visit this person, and on the back of the bed at the wall, they always say who the nurse is. And then in this particular ward, it said 3 things that are important to the patient. And at number 2 was church. And they accepted that for him to keep that connection with the community, with his church family, they had to find a way to bring the church to him at that point on a Sunday. And it was a profound moment when I went in to visit and saw that, realised what they were doing, and realised that the ability to do that was only because of technology and the ability to reach folks. So I'm excited. I think there's a great future for this. It's not going away, and I think we need to just accept that this is here, and how do we use it for the mission of God. Neil, you were thinking about saying something just at the very end about funerals. What about live streaming and things like that?
It was more just to say that live streaming is more than just Sunday worship. And funerals. I mean, part of lockdown life has been restrictions on numbers at funerals, and so the necessity of live streaming at funerals has come to the fore. Although we had been doing it before then, because many people can't attend at short notice. It can't get off work or are in a different country, and coming over for a funeral is a difficult thing. And I think we've all recognised over the last 6 weeks that there is something special about live, which is different from watch again and pre-recorded. And so watching a funeral live at the same time as the rest of the family, being able to have a conversation later in the day, consoling each other, commenting how the service went, because you were all there, you all experienced it, is a thing. And so we'll see it with weddings. We'll begin to see how do group meetings, cell groups, small worship groups, Zoom for these kind of things. We need to make technology more endemic in other aspects of our church, more than just Sunday morning. And so just beginning, you've spent all that effort and energy on technology and kit and training, begin to be enterprising about how wide you use it to increase the accessibility of whatever it is that you're producing.
Yeah, excellent. And in order to help us do that, there are some things there. And please remember, way back at the start of this series, we had David Williams on, who's the funding manager in the Church of Scotland, and he was talking about a programme called Adapt and Thrive from the Scottish Government. And we've just heard today, actually just gave me a phone before we came on air, that it's actually been extended. It was meant to due to run out at the end of June. It's been extended to sometime in July. We're not sure, but to allow it to happen. And so far, the Church of Scotland now we've just broken the £500,000 barrier that has been achieved from that fund, 538,000 to 33 churches, with the majority of them being for technology or reordering the sanctuary in some way. And remember, this is something about how you begin your recovery from COVID as a charity. How do you maximize income? And there is an income part to that as well. But also the criteria has just been tightened a little bit, that you have to demonstrate that you're working with either the most vulnerable people in the community or those most affected by COVID. So if you're able to work up a project, you can speak to David, and he would, I'm sure, be able to help you if you're part of the Church of Scotland, or you can speak to the advisors at Adapt and Thrive as well. You do still need to be quick, but there is still money in the pot that you might be able to access as well. So, guys, we're at the end of our first season of Church Tech Chat. It's been a great 6 weeks. Ian, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate that. And we've put all the links that Ian was talking about in the chat, and please do look at them. Ian, thank you very, very much for being with us today.
No worries. Nice to be here. Thanks.
And can I just say what a rich set of links that is over there?
Yeah.
That is a gold mine of links and knowledge. So do reap that, folks who are watching, because that is great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to add, my role specifically for the Church of Scotland is with priority areas, but we have staff in what's now Faith Nurture, who are always happy to ask questions if your church answer questions. Sorry, we can ask you questions as well, but we'll try and answer your questions if you're a Church of Scotland congregation. Sometimes that will be signposting, so that's what a lot of those links really are. Go to those folk, and they'll give you a direct answer. But you can always contact Faith Nurture at churchofscotland.org.uk for anything worship related.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian. Take care, and we'll see you again soon. Gentlemen, the end of a season. I think we're determined that we might do this again at some point in the autumn. There's certainly a lot of content that we can be there. We've got a lot of new people as well that we can bring in as digital missioners and enablers spring up across the country. These conversations can only get richer as we begin to grapple with what this actually means. So
Agreed.
I wish you a happy summer, Jeremy. I hope your house move goes well to your new multi-staffed role where you're going to have lots more time to do this stuff. I tell you, fantastic. Brilliant. And Neil, thank you for joining us from all your varied locations. We're looking forward to seeing which parts of the world you come from next time as well.
Oh, the world. Now, there's a challenge. I just need someone to commission me to travel the world. Do you know what?
Well, exactly.
Jeremy, I'll even just go to England. So if you want me to...
Wow. Now, there's a bold offer from us.
That is bold. That is bold.
In the spirit of ecumenism, happy to go down to the Church of England and spread my wares down there too.
Absolutely. Sanctus Media available for all denominations and all places, particularly Barbados. I've heard if anyone requires technology there. But thank you to you all for joining us as well over these weeks. We know people have watched it live. We know people have watched it on record, and we hope that you'll join us again in the autumn for our next season of Church Tech Chat. And God bless you as you look into all this technology and understand and just think about a little bit more about what it means for your participation in the mission of God within your communities. Have a wonderful summer. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you all in the autumn. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.